In the quiet suburb of Meadowbrook, where lawns were manicured to perfection and houses gleamed under the afternoon sun, there lived a man named Walter. Walter had spent his entire life in this neighborhood. He took pride in his spotless lawn, his white picket fence, and his belief that everything in his world was just as it should be. But Walter had a problem. A new family had moved in next door, and they didn't look like him or the rest of the residents of Meadowbrook. The Ahmed family, oblivious to Walter's disapproval, were the picture of kindness. Rashid, the father, worked as a software engineer, while his wife, Lila, was a teacher at the local elementary school. Their two children, Amina and Zaid, were polite, bright kids who loved riding their bikes around the cul-de-sac and baking cookies to share with their neighbors. The Ahmeds greeted Walter every morning with a cheerful, "Good day." They waved enthusiastically, but Walter would only grunt in response, or pretend not to notice. His dislike wasn't subtle. "They should learn to stay in their own space," Walter muttered. But life has a way of teaching lessons in the most unexpected ways. One fateful autumn evening, as the wind howled through the trees and dark clouds loomed overhead, Meadowbrook experienced its first major storm in decades. The weather reports had warned of heavy rains and high winds, but no one had anticipated just how severe it would be. As the storm raged, Walter sat in his living room, listening to the howling wind and the occasional crash of debris outside. It wasn't until he heard a loud, splintering crack that he realized he might have underestimated the storm. A towering oak tree in his backyard had been uprooted, crashing onto his roof and breaking through the attic. Rainwater poured in through the gaping hole, and the sound of the wind grew deafening. Walter rushed to grab a bucket, but it was no use. Water was everywhere, and the situation was quickly spiraling out of control. Walter felt the weight of his pride pressing down on him. He had no family nearby, no friends he could call for help. He had spent too many years pushing people away. As the storm intensified, Walter realized he had no choice but to swallow his pride. Across the street, he saw flickering candlelight coming from the Ahmed's house. He hesitated for a moment, his ego battling with his need for help. But the crashing sound of another branch falling on his roof made the decision for him. By the time he reached the Ahmed's door, he was soaked to the bone. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Without hesitation, Rashid ushered him inside. The warmth of their home was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The smell of warm spices filled the air, and the room glowed with the soft light of candles. Layla quickly brought Walter a towel and a cup of hot tea. "Sit down, Mr. Walter," she said gently. "You must be freezing." Walter sat, feeling a mix of gratitude and shame. He had spent months avoiding and judging these people. Yet here they were, welcoming him into their home without a second thought. As the hours passed and the storm showed no signs of letting up, Walter began to see the Ahmeds in a new light. Rashid shared stories about their life before Meadowbrook, how they had moved from the city to give their children a better life, how they loved the sense of community in the suburbs, and how they hoped to be good neighbors. Walter listened, his initial discomfort fading with every word. He found himself laughing at Zaid's jokes and marveling at Amina's stories about her school projects. Layla's warmth and hospitality reminded him of his late wife, and Rashid's calm demeanor put him at ease. For the first time, Walter saw the Ahmeds not as outsiders, but as people, kind, generous, and full of love. By the time the storm subsided in the early hours of the morning, Walter felt like a different man. He thanked the Ahmeds profusely and promised to repay their kindness. But it wasn't just a promise, it was a turning point. In the days that followed, Walter made a conscious effort to change. He waved to the Ahmeds every morning and even stopped by to chat. He invited Zaid to play soccer in his yard and complimented Amina on her artwork. When Layla baked cookies, Walter eagerly accepted them and returned the gesture with his homemade pie. Word of Walter's transformation spread through the neighborhood. The man who once kept to himself and scowled at newcomers was now hosting barbecues and lending tools to anyone in need. The Ahmeds had not only changed Walter's heart, they had brought the community closer together. One sunny afternoon, months after the storm, Walter stood in his yard, painting the picket fence that had once been a symbol of his isolation. Zaid ran up to him, holding a soccer ball. "Mr. Walter, can you come play?" Walter smiled, setting down his brush. "Of course, Zaid. Let's see if I can still keep up." Walter had learned a valuable lesson, one that many people take a lifetime to understand. Community isn't about looking the same or sharing the same traditions. It's about kindness, understanding, and standing together in times of need. And from that day on, Walter made it his mission to ensure that everyone in Meadowbrook felt welcome, just as the Ahmeds had done for him. If you find this video interesting, please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel, and be sure to check this story as well. It would help me motivate myself to make more stories like these. Thank you, and be sure to take care of yourself as well as the ones around you, no matter what their background, traditions, or appearance may be. After all, no matter how different we look from each other, we are still people with feelings and personalities. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.